Hello and welcome to Ben's Balls of Yarn. If you're new here, my name is Ben, and on this channel we like to focus on mainly crochet and sometimes, very occasionally, knitting. In my last video, I showed off this mitten pattern. Now, I made these mittens just before Christmas and I was kind of trying to get the pattern done before Christmas, and I thought there could be some improvement made. And weeks of work later, we have these mittens. These color crochet mittens come in 3 different patterns that I'm very proud of, and they are improved from these mittens by having the thumb in a better placement, also having a little bit of a wider thumb so it's less snug. The pattern, in my opinion, looks better and is actually easier to follow and crochet, and I've written out the pattern in an easier to follow and crochet way, so they're basically better in every single way. I've also worked on the sizing, so you don't have to figure that out for yourself. One thing I did with my original pattern was use 3 different crochet hooks, and now with this one you only have to use 1 crochet hook for each of the different sizes, which is great. What I will say is that when I made this, I was crocheting with quite tight tension. I feel like my crochet tension is quite tight, but for these I've learned to loosen my tension. And funnily enough, I'm in the middle of crocheting a baby blanket and now the tension is different, so it looks weird, but that's a different story for another time. Because the pattern for these Selbu inspired mittens I feel is not as good as this new pattern. This new pattern just has so many better features and is so much easier to crochet. What I'm going to do is actually remove this pattern from my Ravelry and Etsy store. And for the 3 people who actually bought this pattern and helped support the Ben's Balls of Yarn channel, I'm going to email you the patterns for all 3 of these new Color-Work gloves as a thank you for supporting the channel. So this video is intended to be a pattern guide. So in order to make these mittens, you will need the pattern, and you can get that from my Ravelry store or from my Etsy store. There's links in the description field. The Ravelry store is a bit cheaper because they have less fees than the Etsy store, so just so you know. You will also need some yarn, and I'm using this Lima yarn, which is 65% wool and 35% alpaca. So for all sizes, you'll need 3 balls of yarn, 2 in the main colour and 1 in the contrasting colour. I've used white in all of my gloves for the main colour and then various colours for the contrast colour. One thing I will say if you're making the large size mittens is that I had this much yarn left when I'd finished these 2 mittens. So you can get away with just getting 1 ball of the contrast colour yarn and play yarn chicken. But if you don't want to risk it, get 3 balls of the main colour, 2 balls of the contrasting colour, and then just make the large size gloves and the small size gloves. And then you'll definitely have enough for both. So I've weighed out all of my gloves and written out exactly how many grams of each colour each size glove used, and I've put it in a lovely table here for you to see. So if you're wanting to make lots of different size gloves with lots of different colours, you can look at this table and know exactly how many grams of each colour you'll need. The pattern is crocheted exactly the same, no matter the size. To change the size, you just have to change the crochet hook you're using. So for a small mitten, you need to use a 3mm crochet hook, and then for a medium mitten, a 3.5mm crochet hook. And for a large mitten, a 4mm crochet hook. Now the 3.5mm crochet hook is the right size for my hand. So I'm going to put my hand measurements on the screen now, and if your hand measurements are the same or similar to mine, you can crochet a medium mitten. If they're bigger, you can crochet a large, and if they're smaller, crochet small. I've tested all 3 sizes on different members of my family, and the large one fit the biggest member's hand, and the small one fit the smallest member's hand. So now you should have your pattern, and you should have your yarn. So now here are all the tips and tricks for you to get perfect colorwork mittens. For this project, you'll need a pair of scissors, a darning needle, a crochet hook, and optionally a clippy marker. For this colorwork pattern, it's really easy for the stitches to get tight. So I'm going to take this off. Let me know in the comments what this is called. I also like to keep these because on the inside it has the washing instructions. So you can give these with your finished project if you're giving it as a gift, or if you're selling them, you can give it to the customer and they'll know how to wash their yarn properly. I'm going to squish the ball and I'm going to put my fingers in the holes at either end, and I'm going to pull out some of the inside yarn, and now I'm going to use this as a center ball yarn so that we have fairly loose to medium tension, not tight at all. Leaving a 15 centimeter or a 6-inch tail, we are going to make a slip knot. So I like to wrap that round my finger, then use my crochet hook to bring that center piece of yarn through. And now we're going to chain 13. Here is my chain 13. For row 1, we're going to skip the first chain and single crochet 12 into the back bars. You can see on the top side of the chain, which is the side facing the camera, that it looks like a series of V's. We're going to turn the chain over, and now it looks like there's a series of bumps. These bumps are called back bars, and we are going to work our single crochet stitches into these back bars. So turn the chain over, skip this first back bar and go into the next one. I like to use my index finger to pull the back bar onto the hook. Single crochet, 1, index finger to pull the back bar onto the hook, single crochet, 2, and continue to have 12 single crochets. I finished row 1 of the cuff. Now row 2 is a repeat row, and we're going to repeat it 29 times to complete the cuff. Start by chaining 1, turn the work, and now we want to single crochet 12 into the back loops. If we look at the top of the work, we can see these V's. Normally, we will crochet under both legs of the V. But for the next 29 rows, I want you to crochet only into this back loop, which is the one that's further away from you. Skip this chain stitch, then insert your hook into the back loop of the next stitch, single crochet. Now insert your hook into the next back loop of the next stitch, single crochet. That's 2, and we want to have 12 in total. 3, 4, 11, and 12. So you now want to repeat row 2 28 more times for a total of 30 rows. I have completed my 30 rows, and an easy way to know when you're done if you lose count of your rows is to count these ridges. Make sure your yarn tail is on the bottom left and your crochet hook is at the top right, and then count these ridges. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. If you have 15, that means you've done 30 rows. Now it's time to close the cuff into a cylinder. First, chain 1 and fold the cuff in half so that your crochet hook is on the right. To close this cuff, we are going to do some slip stitches, and we are going to go through the front loop on this single crochet side, the side that is closest to you, and we're going to go through the back loops of the original chain stitch, which is the row that's further away from you. So go into the first front loop, Then find your first chain stitch and go into the back loop. Yarn over and pull through all 3 loops on the hook. Go into the front loop of the next single crochet, go into the back loop of the chain stitch, yarn over and pull through all 3 loops. I'll show you one more time. Go into the front loop of the next single crochet, the back loop of the chain stitch, yarn over and pull through all 3 loops. And you want to do this for a total of 12 chain stitches. And now we have sealed our cuff into a cylinder. Before we start the colour work, we need to crochet around the cuff, and I want to have 48 stitches around the top of the cuff. I'm just going to pull this original tail yarn through to the other side of the cuff so it's out of the way. Along the top of the cuff, we can see a sort of V shape here, and a single strand next to it. So from the side, this looks like 3 strands and then a single strand. We're going to work our crochet stitches into this place here. So from the front, there it looks like there's 2 strands and we're going to go between them. And from the top, it looks like you're going underneath 2 strands of a V. We're also going to work stitches into here. So if you look at your single strand thread, underneath there is a thicker 3 or 4 strand part of the crochet, and we're going to work between these 2 strands, and if you look from the top it also looks like you're going under 2 strands here of a V. Around the top of this cuff there should be 15 of this kind of strand and then 15 of this kind of strand. And we want to increase from 30 to 48, and the pattern will detail specifically how to do that. Let me show you the first 5 stitches. So into our first strand, we'll go under those 2 legs of the V. And we will single crochet. And if you prefer, you can now add a clip mark to this first chain so you can remember where the beginning of the round is. Then our next strand we want to do an increase. So we're going to work under these 2 legs of the V. So it will look like there are 3 loops on your hook, the 2 legs of that strand and the thin strand at the top here. And here we want to do an increase. So I'm going to go into that same space again. And now I've done 2 single crochets into that space. Now the next space we want to also do an increase. So I'm going to go under these 2 legs of the V. That's just 1. And single crochet and go in the same place and another single crochet for an increase. And you're just going to follow the pattern and work into those spaces which I've shown you, and this should prevent you from having any holes in your cuff. For example, if I just worked into this one as it was, the single strand, look at that massive hole. We want to avoid that, so this is why I'm going into this space here. I've completed the increase round of the cuff, all but the final stitch. And the reason is because the first round of the colour work begins with a contrasting colour stitch, which is labelled as CC. When you're changing colour in crochet colour work, you always want to change colour in the last loop of the previous stitch. So because my first stitch of the colour work round is going to be the contrast colour, the next stitch of this cuff increase round needs to finish with the new colour. So I'm going to start my single crochet by inserting my hook under those 3 loops, yarn over, pull through a loop, and now stop. Here I have my contrast color. I'm going to leave a 15 centimeter or 6-inch tail, and I'm going to fold it in half. Now I'm going to loop this yarn over my hook and pull through with the contrast color. And now I've completed the increase round. It's time to start the color work, and I will put the first row of this particular pattern on the screen so you can see what it looks like and what I'm doing. So if we look at the pattern, I have this bold CC, which means single crochet in the contrast color, and I have MC2, which means single crochet in the main color twice. We're going to be working into this stitch, which was the top of the first stitch of the increase round, and we're going to be working a contrast color. I'm just going to tuck the tail end of my contrast color through the cuff so it's out of the way. And I'm going to make sure that my contrast color is above my main color. I'm going to hold the yarn with my smallest finger and my ring finger very loosely, very, very loosely. We do not want this to be tight at all. You should be able to pull your yarn very easily through these 2 fingers. Then I'm going to put my index finger between the coloured yarn and the main colour, this index finger of this hand between as well, twist, and then bring my index finger of my left hand up through that twist. So now I'm holding both yarns with the main colour at the back and the contrast colour at the front. This stitch has become a bit loose, so to tighten, I'm going to pull these 2 yarns here and then pull on this yarn just to tighten it a little bit. We don't want it to be tight, but we don't want it to be too loose. I'm sure you all know how tension works. So our first stitch is going into this first stitch of the increase round, and it's a contrast stitch. So I'm going to insert my hook under both these as usual in crochet and single crochet. So I'm going to pull through a loop. Now my next stitch is going to be in the main color. So I'm going to stop there and I'm going to yarn over with the white now and pull through 2. Now my next 2 single crochets are in white. So I'm going to insert my hook, single crochet white, just as normal, and the next one's white, but I'm going to stop now that I have 2 loops on the hook because my next stitch is in the contrast color. So now I'm going to yarn over with the contrast color and pull that through. So I'm going to start my next stitch, which is contrast, and then my following stitch is main color, so I'm going to stop and yarn over with the white. When I'm holding the yarn like this, I always yarn over the white or the main color from between the yarn and my hand, not over the top. Next is the main color. So insert your hook, yarn over, pull through a loop. And now the next is 2 contrasts. So I'm not going to complete this stitch. I'm going to yarn over with the blue and do 2 single crochets in the contrast and stop before the color change to pull the white through. And now I have 2 in white. And once you get into the rhythm of things, you can actually crochet with some speed. And 1 more in white. So that's my first 12 stitches. And I'm going to repeat that 3 more times for the first row. I've just got to the end of the first round and I've left my 2 loops on the hook because my next color is going to be in the contrast color. My next stitch is the contrast color. And then my next stitch is in the main colour. Now, if you want, you can add a clip marker to this first stitch of the round just to keep track of it. I will show you another way to keep track of it without the clip marker in a moment. I've almost completed round 2, and the final stitch of round 2 is an increase in the main colour written like this in the pattern. So I'm going to single crochet with the main colour in the final stitch of the round. And as with any increase, we're going to go in the same stitch. And then I've got my 2 loops left on the hook, and I'm going to change to the contrast colour because the first stitch in the next round is in the contrast colour. I just completed the second to last stitch of round 3, and into this final stitch of round 3 we're actually going to crochet a contrasting coloured stitch and a main coloured stitch. So to do that, we're going to insert our hook, yarn over, pull a loop through, then yarn over with the white, insert the white into the same stitch, yarn over with the white, pull a loop through, and our first stitch of round 4 is in the contrasting colour, so I'm going to change to the contrasting colour. And now let me continue with round 4 and round 5. I've just finished round 5, and this is where we're doing the thumb increases, as you can see. So you can kind of tell these stitches look a little bit different because they're increased stitches or 2 stitches in the same space. So you can tell that this is the beginning of the round. You can also tell before the thumb stitches there is this main colour line starting to form. So you can always tell that this is the last stitch of the colour work before the thumb part. And once we've done the increases for the thumb and we no longer need them, this will always be the last stitch in the round, this kind of white line. Now, because this is a repeating pattern, this white line appears 4 times, but the final white line is always the last stitch of your round. So the following stitch after that will be the first stitch of your round. So if you think you can keep track of that, you do not need to use the stitch marker. And now I've made a fair number of these gloves for these patterns, so I can crochet without that stitch marker now. One more thing about this colour work is that it does leave little strands of yarn in the inside of the work. Now, this is fine if you are just crocheting 1 single crochet stitch or 2 single crochet stitch in a row. But if you are doing 3 or more single crochet stitches, you want to capture the other coloured yarn. So this particular pattern doesn't actually call for any more than 2 single crochet stitches in a row, but some of them do. So let me show you how I do that. So if I'm crocheting more than 3 single crochets in the contrasting colour, I will capture the main colour on even stitches. So single crochet in your contrast colour as normal. Then for the second stitch, we want to capture the white yarn. So to do this, I'm going to go into my stitch. I'm going to put my hook underneath the white yarn, and then I'm going to put the hook over the top of the white yarn. And then I'm going to put my hook over the top of the contrast yarn, and then underneath the contrast yarn. So I've kind of wrapped the white yarn around this contrasting coloured yarn, and I'm going to pull a loop through, and then I'm going to yarn over with the contrasting colour like so, and I'm going to pull it through. Now if you look at the back here, the white's kind of got a bit bunched up, so I'm just going to tug on the white just very lightly so it's not bunched up at the back anymore. And now I've captured that white yarn. So then I would do my third single crochet as normal, and then say I had to do a fourth one, I would do the same thing. Go into the work, under the white, over the white, over the contrast, under the contrast, pull it through, yarn over with the contrast and pull it through. And then my next one would be normal. What if you had to do 3 or more of the main colored yarn? We want to insert our hook into the work and crochet as normal. Insert the work into the hook, pull through a loop, and now this time, instead of picking up the main colored yarn this way by going through the gap that's between your fingers and the yarn, you want to go around over the top of the contrast color yarn over and pull through. And now we've captured the main colored yarn. Now for my third stitch, I'm just going to single crochet as normal. And then say I need to do a fourth stitch, I would single crochet as normal, go over the top of the contrasting colored yarn and crochet. And then my fifth stitch as normal. And here you can see now the blue yarn is being caught every 2 stitches, and here you can see the white yarn was caught every 2 stitches. This just stops your color work from bunching up. Let me show you what would happen if I didn't capture the yarn every 2 stitches. So say I did 6 stitches in the main color. 1, 2, 6. So now, if I pick up this blue yarn, look what happens. The work's bunching up because this is too short. Now you could pull it, but I find it very hard to maintain the tension and keep this from bunching up. I'm on the 48th stitch of round 15, and here you can see where I've increased for the thumb. Now we want to close this up to make a thumb hole. The pattern says chain 1 in the contrast color. So this is my 48th stitch, and I'm going to finish this stitch with the contrast color. I'm going to chain 1, then I'm going to skip 13 stitches. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. And now I'm going to single crochet in the contrast color into this 13th stitch, making sure that the yarn isn't too loose. And then I'm going to complete that stitch in white because my next stitch is going to be a white stitch. And now we have created our hole for our thumb. I've reached the second to last stitch of round 32, and the last stitch in round 32 is a decrease stitch. This decrease stitch is going to go into the last stitch of round 32 and the first stitch of round 33, and all following decrease stitches will go into the first stitch of the next round. For this project, we're going to do traditional decreases. So to do a traditional decrease, you want to go into the next stitch, yarn over, pull through a loop. Then, before completing this stitch, go into the next stitch, yarn over, pull through a loop. Now you have 3 loops on the hook. My next stitch is going to be a contrasting stitch, so I'm going to yarn over with the contrasting color and pull through all 3 loops. I'm on the final stitch of the final round, which is a decrease, and I've pulled my 2 loops through, and I'm just going to finish this one off in the white. Now I'm just going to pull a nice long tail, about 15 centimeters or 6 inches. Oops. Scissors are a little blunt. And then I'm just going to pull the white yarn out, leaving my long tail, longish tail. You also need to cut the blue yarn, leaving about 15 centimeters, enough just to weave in the end comfortably. I'm now going to thread the contrasting color yarn onto a needle. And I'm going to poke it through the gap in the top of the glove, and I'm going to use the blunt side of the needle so as not to pierce any of the yarn strands. I'm going to tuck my hand up inside the glove, which is easy when you're doing a large size and less easy if you have big hands doing a small size glove. pull my needle out and thread the white yarn onto the needle. Now we should have 7 stitches around the top of the mitten, and we're going to go into the front loops only from the front like this. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. Now poke your needle in through the hole again using the blunt end. Pull the needle all the way through inside the glove. And now we can turn the glove inside out. I've accidentally managed to capture 2 floats here with my needle, so I'm just going to pull that yarn out. And now I'm going to pull on this white yarn, closing the hole. Now I'm going to rethread my contrasting coloured yarn onto the needle. And I'm going to thread the yarn behind some of these loops. I'm going to skip one loop and then go back along the loops that I came through to about here. Take my scissors and cut this yarn tail at the surface of the mitten and repeat with the white. Before we attach the yarn to start crocheting the thumb, I just want to point out some of the stitches that we're going to be working into. So this is our first stitch that we skipped, and I'm going to call this stitch number 1. This is going to be the stitch where we do our first crochet stitch of the thumb. And then you can work around 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. We skipped 13 stitches, but we want to make 18 stitches for this thumb. So we're going to work our 14th stitch into the next stitch along from this stitch, which is here. It already has a crochet stitch in it that we worked before. So this is the first stitch of round 16, technically. And now we need to work 3 gaps here across this part of the work. So it's not super important where you go, but you just want to find gaps that are close to the edge of the work and have at least 2 strands so that we don't end up with big holes like this. So I'm probably going to go in here where I can see a white and a green strand, or blue. And then, so that would be my gap number 15. Then I always like to work into this gap, which is where we did our chain stitch on round 15. And then I'm going to work into this gap here, where I can see a single crochet stitch in white. And then our final 18th stitch is going to go into this stitch here, which was stitch number 48 of round 14. So it's one stitch before our first stitch where we are going to start our thumb. Okay, so you just want to work around your 13 stitches and then place your final 5 stitches kind of evenly along the back of the thumb here. The first round of the thumb is single crochet in the contrast color, single crochet in the main color times 9. So I'm going to start with a standing stitch in my contrasting color. So I'm going to leave about 15 centimeter tail and make a slip knot. Then I'm going to insert my hook into stitch number 1, which is this stitch here. Going to make sure my yarn is coming on the back side of my hook as per usual. Make sure you pick up the strand that's not the tail end, and we're going to yarn over and pull through a loop. Now our next stitch is the main colour, so I'm going to fold over my main colour, leaving about a 15 centimeter tail, loop it over the hook and pull it through. So now we want to put our tails to the back of the work so they're not getting too in our way. And now pick up your yarn and we're going to single crochet in the white, and we're just alternating as it is written in the pattern for the first row. So I'm going to get to stitch 13 and I'll show you me adding in the other 5 stitches. So I've done the first 13 stitches of the first round of the thumb, and now I'm going to push my tails inside the thumb just to get them out of the way. Okay, so our next stitch is white, and as I pointed out before, I'm going to do it in this first stitch of round 16. Okay, the next one is blue, so we'll finish that stitch off in blue. And as I said before, I'm going to go under this white and blue stitch here. And then finish that stitch off in the white. And the next one is the chain stitch of round 15. And I'm also going to go under this white float here. Pull through a white loop, then finish the stitch off in blue. Then I'm going to go into this gap here in the blue. And then finally, I'm going to go into this stitch, which I believe is stitch 48 of round 14. Yeah. And finish in the contrasting color because my next stitch in the next round is going to be contrasting color. So now we just work our thumb as we worked the main body of the mitten, going round, then doing the decreases and closing off just as we did the main body. It's exactly the same, it's just smaller. When you go to weave in the base of the thumbtails, you might notice that your glove is a little bit gappy around the base. So just take your needle and you want to kind of weave up and down to close these holes. Don't pull too tightly. Thank you for watching my video today. If you enjoyed it, please give it a like. Consider supporting this channel by subscribing, or even better yet, buying one of my patterns on my Etsy or Revelry. Buy it on Revelry, it's cheaper. And if you're interested in colour work items you can wear, I've got loads of ideas percolating in my brain, and there'll definitely be videos coming out later on in this year with colour work crochet. So subscribe, I've already said that, stick around, I'll see you next time, bye!